Tomás, how you doing? It's Paul Keane here. I may jump in and throw the ball in.
Paul,
Are we going to have any league finals at all, do you think, or what do you make of that whole scenario? Is it undermining the leagues a little bit where things are at the moment?
yeah, look, I suppose if you have a competition, you want to have a final, and I think it does. It's to a certain degree, it does undermine the whole thing. Like but at the same time, then like you have a free weekend this week. There are injuries happening all around us. Do you play this weekend, and then I think if you threw it out to players and management, they'd probably go with what you have right now and go with the fact that you'll have a 2 week building. There's no way that teams would accept or managers would accept a week of a build up if they have Ulster Championship the following week or Munster Championship, whatever it is, that they'd accept it. So you kind of you accept that, like, but at the same time you're thinking, Jesus, is there any way they could have done it that they could have got the final in there? Or is there any way where they could play? I'd say you're taking the kind of steam out of it if you play it further along the line after a championship or something like that. Is there any chance? The only way I was thinking of it, is there any chance they could have robbed? They probably would have had to change the whole championship, put the whole championship back a week if they were to eat into club time on the other side of it, and then you'd be causing. I'm pretty sure the GA, and I'd be quick and trying to find holes in it, but I'm pretty sure they did it to the best way they could possibly do it, and hope then that it fell their way in terms of the. But it's like the chances now are that there won't be finals in three of them. But look, a lot of it, especially, it's not about the cup; it's about going up and down, and they'll still have that, which is, I suppose, the main thing that they need out of the divisions and out of the. But again, yeah, there has to be a certain glint, even for the likes of Allianz and all that, not to have their big day and not to have the cup and not to have. It's still a huge thing, and it can benefit a team in a way, like, the confidence. Maybe not in Division One, maybe Division Two, winning a cup, winning actually something like that can actually drive on a team. So it's disappointing, but I don't think. I think the main stakeholders involved have kind of moved on with it in terms of the teams and the managers and all that. So I don't think it's that huge a deal for them. But I think it does take a glass out of it, yeah, and it kind of does question the integrity. But then at the other side of it, it kind of balances up when you look at it from both sides.
Okay. Kerry obviously won it last year, and they could retain it in some form if they're joint winners this year. Would they celebrate it at all? Like, I mean, doing back to back in that manner. Certainly not in the way that Mayo did in 2019. Like, what would it actually mean to Kerry, do you think?
To win the league?
Yeah, or to retain it, or whatever you might actually call it. I mean, would they even celebrate it or see it as any sort of success?
I don't think the league meant much last year after down in Parky Creeve. It didn't mean anything at all. And that isn't disrespecting it, but the league doesn't mean very, very much. Like, I mean, certain teams need a victory and all that. And I think Kerry and the bigger teams, the Dublins and the bigger teams in Division 1 use it. Tyrone are using it for one reason only at the moment, and that it isn't all about winning, even though, yes, they all want to stay up in Division 1 because of the teams that you have above there, but they're using it to try to embed a new style of play. Kerry are using it because maybe Kerry do need to get a few victories under their belt to get the confidence going and to get to right what happened last year. Didn't seem to bother Mayo when they were trying out so many players and getting so many players and emphatically winning 3 games below in Division 2 to come straight back up. Like, I just love the way they can just, nothing seems to rattle them or phase them. They're just tunnel vision, and say mentally they don't seem as they're focused. Like, a lot of other teams, maybe you see Roscommon and what has happened to them, Meath, what's happened to them. But I suppose Mayo are around the block that bit longer, and Horn has been around the block, and they still have players that have been around the block a long time. So that adds to the whole thing. So that's what Kerry are trying to get out of the league. This kind of belief that when they go to, like, particular games for Kerry, the Dublin game was a huge one for them. I think the Dublin game was a huge one for them. Like Roscommon, yeah, getting a victory up there was important. Galway, it was a strange game. It was a non-event. I thought the Dublin game from far out was a big one for them because I felt they needed to lay a statement, and I felt they needed to win it, and I felt it would be an important one for them to win. So the league is many things to a lot of teams, but Yeah, I don't think winning the league is a be all and end all. If Kerry had beaten Dublin, if both teams had been strong and lost the other two games, I think Kerry people and Kerry management would take more out of that than actually winning the league.
Okay. I just ask you one last one then. What do you think of Tyrone travelling all the way down to Killarney, kind of COVID wise and regionalised leagues and all? Is it a bit bonkers to be sending them all the way down?
It's just conflicting. Like it's just, I don't know. Look, I'm teaching. I'm seeing it from school. There's still cases around the place, and the place is opening up, and it's great to see it opening up. And I think it is tough. I think it's hard. Like I've no doubt that somebody said the hotels are opening up and all that, and they will be open, so it won't be an issue that they won't be able to stay or whatnot. And it'll be, but it's still, if the whole league treats it, if it's championship and you go down that way, that's fine. But you set up a league with two separate divisions geographically to make sure that none of this happens. And geez, like it or lump it, I've gone up to Tyrone, I've gone up to Donegal, and you have to face work the following day. And then when you see other teams tossing and travelling halfway, yes, I don't know. I don't think it looks good. And Antrim travelling as far as Waterford as well. It's tough. I wouldn't see any issue in playing it halfway. And I think it's been very hard. I think it's been underestimated how difficult it is logistically for teams to travel. Limerick travel to Wicklow, and they talk about it, but it'd be interesting to see a player from his point of view what has actually gone out of it, like, because half of it, half of what actually gives players energy is the buzz around the social side of it, like, and people say the social side of it has gone out of it, but geez, I can imagine what they're going through now. They're not traveling in cars together. They're not huddling, meeting up for food after together. They're not having the banter inside in dressing rooms after together, and all that is gone. Like, and that does make whatever they say about it being a boring game, it must be a very boring game at the moment. Like, and I think that's where it's hard for players. Like, but I definitely think in the current condition, it's a huge ask. It's not a huge ask. They'll do it, and there'll be no complaining about it. And it was done last year for Mana travel with a weakened team down as far as Clare. But I do think that when you see it happening other places, that they're going halfway, and when you see that the whole league was based on where you were in the country, and then to flip it for the last round of it, I don't know. I think it's a bit Irish, to be honest with you.
Tomás, Michal Clifford here. How are you keeping?
Michal, how are you, boy?
Struggling on. Tomás, even if we get a league final and it's obviously it can only be Dublin and Tyrone in the Division 1 final, will that final be devalued by the very fact that people will say, well, look, only Donegal and Kerry were playing for a half share of a league title in the semi-finals?
It probably will, and it'll probably determine as well if the likes of Kerry are playing and the likes of Donegal are playing. It'll be interesting to see what teams they'd put out. I'd say a lot of teams, those teams in particular, Michal, will probably have full eyes on championship now, and the fact that it's a knockout even more so. And but I do think it's a watered down league from the start, and then if mind games come into it, you'll see straight away when the teams that they pick and the teams that they choose. But at the same time, then it comes down to what every team needs. If every team, like you look at Galway's needs and Dublin's needs and Kerry needs are different. Like Galway need to get a couple of wins before they head into a tough kind of championship. So they'll go as strong as they can. Obviously, they have to. But what I'm saying is, it will be. There'll be question marks on whatever way you look at it. I think you're going to have question marks because I think teams now are going to, obviously, Division 2 and Division 3, it's huge for them to stay up and not go down. But because it's a tough battle to go down Division 3 and then try to fight your way back out of it for the championship structure the year after. But I do think like that a lot of teams will play it cagey, and I do think it'll take a bit of steam out of devalue it. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I do think so. Yeah.
Tell me, Tomás, about the other thing about it is that about the league finals for Division 4, Division 3 teams, and even perhaps Division 2, but particularly Division 3 and Division 4 teams. Is it a bit odd, given that the GA is pushing for a Tier 2 championship that is giving those teams something to play for, that they haven't allowed those finals to go ahead even later in the summer in a knockout championship? There's going to be gap weekends, and it's quite likely that Division 3 and Division 4 teams will be out of the championship after one or two rounds. Should the GA reconsider and put those sorry about that, my mobile went off. Allow for those finals to take place.
And Nokia, Michal, is it?
I was saying, is it possible to play the Division 3 and Division 4 finals later in the summer, after when there's a gap weekend after a knockout championship, for those teams? Because look, I mean, it's a big, for the likes of Carlow. Carlow haven't won a trophy, I don't think, since 2002 O'Byrne Cup. I mean, is there not an opportunity there for the GA to say we'll play those finals when the Division 3 and Division 4 teams are knocked out of the championship in early summer?
There's so many things you could argue. I think, yeah, but then Division 1 and Division 2 will probably say, or whoever the powers be will say, you can't have two finals and then not have the others. I think it would be important for them. I think the minute that a knockout championship was announced last year with the COVID, Division 3s and Division 4 teams are going to be hit most. With the watered down league, then the league is everything to them, like everything. You see it every year. You talk to those fellas, and I know I have a few buddies, and the league is everything to them. The same bite isn't in it for them in terms of championship. And then Cavan and Tipperary, who possibly could go down to Division 4, win provincial championships, and you're saying, Jesus, turns it completely on its head. But I think like 3 games and then a 4 games and a possible final would be huge. But obviously a victory for any one of those teams in the Division 3 or 4 final would be huge, yeah. But do I see it happening that they'd put on the Division 3 and 4 finals? I probably don't. I don't. If that's the case, then they could have made room for the finals at this stage. Like, where are you going to get the room down the road? The fact that they're out of the championship, yeah. But if you're knocked out of the championship, do fellas have the bite to come back into it then, or do fellas have the drive to actually turn around and say, yeah, we're going to train on here because we do have a final? But again, it would possibly. There's something that they take, but I don't know. Would the GA have a hunger of going down that road? I think, like, in terms of fixtures and everything, we can complain and we can give out about this, but geez, the GA have an awful time of it. Like, I see there that there's crowds allowed in now from Monday on, which is good. Like, but even at that, there's going to be people complaining. It's a tough racket to drive on what they're trying to drive on, but they're trying to do it the best way they can, and we'll find holes in it and we'll give out about it. But then every time you find a solution in one way, you're gonna meet a wall the other side of it. So I'm not sure. I mean, really, I don't know. I think it'd be vital for them, but I can't see how it would pan out. Like, you know.
Okay, cheers, Tomás.
Tomás, how are you doing? Shane Stapleton here.
Shane, how are you?
I'm not too bad. I was down at the league match between Kerry and Dublin. You mentioned the importance of it to Kerry, but early in the second half, Dublin kept the ball for about 4 minutes, we'll say, and then made it 3-7 to 9 points. At that point, were you very worried about where Kerry were going? And, you know, I mean, they obviously came back brilliantly, but it looked worrying at that point.
It did, Shane. I tell you, I was livid I was watching the game and I was roaring at it, and I don't think the people around me enjoyed it because you become a fan or whatever. But geez, at halftime I was saying, my God, and then it happened. I remember it happened, and then they went around and you were looking at it and you were saying, geez, where's the reaction here now? Where's the change up here? And then they do it and you say, there's an inevitability here again with the Dubs. And you're at that point you are saying, yeah, Jesus Christ, I was disgusted. Like, I thought there'd be a bite in it and getting the old fingers ready to go nuts on the phone. But then they actually came back, and look, that's where the kind of, you're looking at one point of view from a work point of view, and then you're looking at it from a fan point of view and say, geez, yeah. And you're talking to fellas, and I talked to a lot of Kerry people who would talk about it day in, day night, and there is that thing there, but there isn't this consistency still, like, you know, and you're looking for that, and then everybody will question the defence. And I think sometimes it's easy to question the defence. Like, I think you have to question the whole lot. You have to question the whole lot in terms of 15 back when you're talking about defence. And look, there's been a lot of talk about it in terms of, I saw Tommy Conlon wrote an article there where they're missing a few dogs at the back, and that's becoming an issue. I think the way teams are playing at the moment, there's better shape around the pitch, and there's going to be opportunities and there's going to be space, and they're going to have to be ready for that. And you're going to expect that the Cliffords and the Gainies will get the same space up the other side, and then it becomes a shootout. But then the men at the back are going to become so vital in that. And, you know, Mick Fitz, who I'd regard as one of the best in the last whatever length of time he's around a long time now. And when you have space, even Clifford will make him look silly at times as well. And I think it's a matter then when hopefully nobody knows, but if they go head to head again down the road, who learns most from the last time that they set out? And a big thing for me was Cluxon wasn't playing either. which I think had an impact. But it was heartening to see what they did in the second half. And then the frustration comes into it, and you say, Jesus Christ, why can't they actually do that for a full 70? I know it'd be very hard to do it for a full 70, and you have to mix it up. But where was that intent in the first half, like? So, yeah, it's a frustrating one with Kerry, because you don't know where you are really when it comes to it. They'll beat most teams, but in Kerry there's nobody gives a. It's not that they don't care. They'll go nuts if they lose the likes of Cork, but they'll judge everything on winning the whole thing out, and that's, call it right or wrong, but that's the way it is.
And is it very simplistic to say, look, they just started pushing up or tackling more aggressively further up the field, maybe? Is that a very simplistic way of looking at how they change things?
Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes teams try to take things to a too high a level when it comes to tactical stuff. But you would have to say, how come, like, you have water breaks, and say what you like about water breaks, but that's, you reset at water breaks. Dublin came out, and I suppose at half time the last day against Galway, and totally reset and focused on what they needed to focus on. And a question you'd have to have is, why does it take half time, or why does it take that long? Like, all this talk about Dublin redoing it inside in the middle of matches, and you see players coming into huddle and resetting and rejigging and replanning. Would that not have been part of the plan from the very word go, like, that you push into their faces? Like, we all know that Dublin want to have a man back, and you all know that the best way of actually going at them would be to man up and go man to man like Mayo have done. And I'd argue that Kerry have a better six up front than Mayo ever had in the last 7 or 8 years. But then somebody would counter argue that and say 1 to 9 are way better, way more physical than Kerry had. Who was in charge of that? 1 to 9 with Mayo is another thing, because he was with Kerry and he's gone now. But look, that's a thing for another day. But yeah, that argument is there, and why wouldn't you have that tactic in the first half? Because Kerry looked very lax, and if you go back on the 3 goals, you could rewind the video way back before your man actually pulled the trigger for the goal, and you could find an issue way out the field before you get the one-on-one inside. But the finger will point at the one-on-one, and you have to improve with the one-on-ones inside. There's no doubt about that, but you can improve out the field as well.
If you were to, I mean, obviously you played with Kerry for years and your uncle was manager and talked about the scrutiny. What sort of scrutiny would Peter Keane have faced in the last 6-8 months? You know, what would he be here? Would people be sort of looking at him odd in the last number of months? Because the amount of talk about the way they lost and the manner of the loss to Cork, you know, it just seemed incessant.
Yeah, look, the players themselves know, and Peter Keane knows himself what kind of a county it is, and that's the famous quote by Paddy years ago. You know, the animals, and I think they're in every county. If you're being honest, they're in every club. You know, somebody will throw something, but Peter Keane is in a business where he's meeting the public all the time, and they'd have strong opinions, and they wouldn't be slow in telling you, and that's what you're living with. And then the frustration lies in that you don't have a chance to actually put it right until the following year. And look, Eamon Fitzmaurice, he spoke about getting letters. They're insane about it, you know, and they're not afraid to say it, and it would be spouted in different forms. I would imagine. I've never, as a player, you get it in different ways if you're out socially or whatever, and fellas are feeling brave and they'll say it. And but look, that's just the way it is. And I think, look, Shane, if you have that in every county, you know, in the big traditional counties, you would have it. I'm not sure. I don't really ever hear the Kilkenny boys on about it. But you have it in every county. I see it in Cork. I'm here. The abuse the Cork footballers get is something savage altogether and ridiculous, and the way they're looked upon is wrong in a way. Like, but that's just the way it is. How do you change that? I don't know. I think it'll always be the way. And in some instances, it does help you and it does drive you on. So he'd have a long winter of it, and they'd question everything. They'd question everything. They'd question what backroom team they'd have. They'd question selectors. They'd question the roles of players. They'd question why other players aren't on the bench or on the squad, and everything that goes around the place. They even start up WhatsApp conversations. Tis bedlam.
Just a final question for me then, and your thoughts on the balance of the Kerry team at the moment. Paul Ganey wearing number 12. I don't know if he's always out in wing forward line. Diarmuid O'Connor has come in. He's done well. Paddy Clifford's come in and got his chance. Just what are your thoughts on how the Kerry team is developing?
Yeah, you'd have to be very happy with Paddy Clifford. I think he's. I saw him 3 or 4 years playing with UCC at high level, and that no matter what anybody says, the Sigerson, when inter-county players are allowed to play, is a huge high standard. And I saw them go through he was the player of the tournament for UCC, and he gave you that link and that bullish link around the middle of the field, like that maybe Kerry have been lacking, that dog that you've been lacking around the middle of the field, and he has an engine on him. And it's been good to say. I thought he'd come in now and he tried too hard to make an impression, but he's doing the simple things right, and he's a bonus. And Diarmuid O'Connor is a bonus. He's hit 4 or 5 points in the last 2 games, and he's giving you something. He's giving you athleticism around the middle of the field, but he'll come up against tougher tests. So it is great saying that they're going great at the moment, but I'd question maybe the tests that they've had. But everything is positive. Paul Ganey is dangerous near to goal, and what are they looking at inside? They're obviously looking at Clifford inside, but it's interesting. And in fairness to them, they've tried over 26 or 27 players already. Tony Brosnan came on the last day, kicked a couple of scores. But I suppose you have to look at it from the full package. You have to look at it, what a player is going to give you on the ball, and you have to look at what a player is going to give you off the ball. And they have to weigh that up. But I think it's been positive for Kerry so far this league. I think even going up the last day, there was a lot of stuff maybe that you'd look at against Roscommon and say you kind of could find holes in it. But then they knuckled down when they had to knuckle down. So, look, it's good to see a couple of new players coming in and doing well, and hopefully they'll get a run in championship as well. But yeah, the Paul Ganey one is interesting because it's a tough role, a half-forward line and a half-back line now, and midfielders. You need serious engines to get up and down the field, and maybe David Moran and Paul Ganey were taken off maybe early in the last couple of games as well. So maybe that's the role that they have to look at. But Ganey would be a danger near to goal. He just has that confidence close to goal, and you'd imagine that they'd like to have him there. But I look, it's hard to question them when they're doing what they're doing, and they're doing well.
Thanks, Tomás.
Thanks, Shane.
Hey, Tomás, Brian Berry here. How are things?
Brian, how are you, bud?
Good, thanks. You mentioned there before the Dublin match the importance of laying down a statement against them. In its own way, given the context that they trailed by 7, was the comeback a statement?
It was, yeah, it was. I think it definitely was, and there was probably chances to win it and chances to lose it. But I suppose then you have to look at the balance of the whole game then and say why. It's hard to trust them at times. Is what I'm saying. It's hard to trust Kerry. We'll go up against Clare above and Ennis, and everybody will look at it as a kind of a Yara comment. But the reason Kerry didn't really lose under our time anyway is that you blow out what talk is outside, and you would take the game so seriously that you would be going up there with a bit of fear that if you did lose, what would happen, and the backlash that would be there. But I don't think maybe is the same fear about this Kerry team that you could still ask questions about them, and you can't trust them to actually blow certain teams that they should be blowing out of the water or beating them convincingly. Like Clare will fancy having a right good rattle at Kerry. And I'm not saying that's not right. It is right. But when you see what happened to Kerry against Cork last year, and when you see what happened to Kerry against Dublin in the league, and then even when Kerry had the foot in the door against Dublin, the draw in All-Ireland 2 years ago, and how they couldn't finish off, then you see Kerry management and Kerry players would have to. There'll be question marks still, and that's the downside of being those question marks won't be answered until one thing happens, and that's the downside of the scrutiny that's on them,
What do they need to get out of the semi-final, for want of a better term, for that match against Tyrone?
I think it's a big game for them as well, but I suppose I said it at the start. It depends what way they approach it, and what are they going to be looking fully at championship? Are they going to be happy with their lot in the league? And I think they have got a good bit out of the league in terms of the players and whatever structures they're trying to get in place. And I suppose it's better to see what happened in the first half above against Dublin there again, where they'll have to focus in on rather than it happening down the road. So I don't know. I think it possibly is a good, very good game for them, because Tyrone still, Logan and Doer will still want to be putting an imprint, and I think it would do Tyrone an awful lot of good to get a win down in Kerry. And depending then on what type of a win or a loss you get, you can carry that with you going through. So look, it all depends on where they're at. Like, if they go out full on, both teams go out full on to win that game, which you'd hope they do, there's a lot to be learned in it as well. And I do think that type of, I think Kerry have to be prepared in two types of way. I think that Tyrone will possibly play a little bit more defensive and get bodies a bit back, a bit quicker and a bit more organised possibly than even Dublin. Dublin will go on man and push up high up the field. And I think Tyrone will still mix it, and they're still kind of learning their trade and what way they want to go at it. So that kind of stuff Kerry can learn from as well, because they will, like, they're going to have to face them or an Ulster team if they come out of Munster, and that is going to be a huge game. Like, there's so many big games along the way. Like Cork will be a big one, Clare will be a big one. If this is all hearsay, if they don't freaking have, if they're not focusing or they're not tuning in, if they're not winning. But I think potentially, Brian, I don't know. It depends what way they're going to take. Donegal came down to the Tralee last year in the last round of what turned out to be Kerry winning the league. And it was a pure false game. And Kerry are actually built up on the basis of that and maybe got a bit carried away with it. And the next game they played was against Cork and they lost it. So, look, it all depends on the approach of the two teams coming into it, basically, is what I'm saying.
Cheers, Tomás. Thanks.
Hi, Tomás. It's Gordon Manning here. How are you?
Gordon, how are things?
I'm good, thanks. Just a quick one, Tomás, on the defensive issues. Against the Dubs, I suppose a lot of the balls that the Dublin caused problems for Kerry were pretty agricultural, high balls in on top of the full back line. Do you think that was in any way kind of a message Dublin were sending to Kerry, that they believed that Kerry had vulnerabilities there and maybe just putting a few fresh doubts into their heads?
Yeah, it could be. And it isn't often you see. I saw Pascal kicking a long-range score the last day. It was the first time I've seen a long-range kick by Dublin for a point in a long time. And then throwing in 50-50 balls is something that you wouldn't associate with them either, if they're not sure of it. But they obviously have pointed out weaknesses in the Kerry defence, and maybe Kerry weren't defending now. Like, you're always kind of expecting to have, if you hold them up for 2 or 3 seconds, you'll have plenty of support. So yeah, maybe that's something they have to look at. But I'd be more worried about how Merchant pinged down the left wing and got through the defence outside, which was your middle third of the pitch. Merchant ghosted up, and it was Merchant that created that goal. And that's something they have to look at. They're the ones that are happening more often than the other ones. And look, Peter Crowley is a big loss in terms of physicality and all that. But I think they'll have to learn. They'll have to look at the way those goals came from, the high ball, long ball in, because it had happened. It cost them a game down in Cork last year. And they'll have to look at it the other way. And that's the only two ways that people can play. They can run at you or they can kick it long. And at the moment, I suppose there is scrutiny on Kerry from that regard. And that brings pressure then, I suppose. Pressure on management and pressure on players. And it's hard to sort it out sometimes. And people will scrutinise the personnel and compare it to older teams and different players and what other teams have currently. And look, they're all struggling defensively, if you ask me, lads. Armagh are struggling. Armagh got a hosing off Donegal last year and have set up really, really defensively and still are being opened up. Donegal the same. So I think football has changed in a way like that. Teams are attacking a lot more, and this whole lateral stuff is they're trying to break out of it. So they have to be ready for, even if you have numbers back, the teams are going to run at you, and when they see any half chance, they're going to go at you. And look, the Dubs have it down to a T, and that day definitely there's a lot to look at, and there's a lot to scrutinise about it. Yeah.
Would you feel that Kerry have made any progress in that regards in the last 12 months, or do you think the fact that, as you said, football, maybe there seems to be a bit more openness, that you wouldn't be as massively concerned as maybe some people might be, that Kerry are still as kind of vulnerable at the back?
Well, you see, I think two huge attacking players for Kerry are Tom Sullivan and Paul Murphy. And a lot of the time then they'll be given man-marking roles inside. And to give a man-marking role, it's a tough role in that I was never given it, but you have to sacrifice your own game. You have to sacrifice risking going up the field. And you just zone in for the full hour and a half. And if you look at any team, let's say Dublin, for example, if before you go out in the pitch, you're going to have somebody for Kilkenny, you're going to have somebody for Conor Callaghan, you're probably going to have somebody for Scully, and the way Costello is going, you're going to have somebody for them as well. And that's the way, before you even sit down, you're going to have to man mark them. And then you might be playing away a style of football in the league that you are working away, and Paul Murphy was going great going up the field, Tom Sullivan might have been great going up the field, and then that part of your game is gone. Gavin White might be given a man marking job in the half back line, and that part of his game is gone. So it's all about how do you find the balance and how do you have the men to actually do that, and that's what it comes down to. Like they never ever line out as 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 anymore. And 7, they line out man on man. They have certain fellas that they put on certain fellas, and that's the way they're going to do. And look, you can be saying whatever, they won't be tested until if they get a chance to meet Dublin again.
And just last one for me, Tomás. Then just the inside mark. Obviously, a lot of people critical of it in the game. What's your kind of your opinion on where or what it brings to the game or doesn't bring to it?
Look, I've spoke about it so many times. I don't like it. I just think the traditional game we have, even outside of what the mark could bring and all that, even when it was being defensive, like I still argue when Dublin beat Tyrone, and then you had somebody beating Carlow. I don't know who it was at Laois beating Carlow, the same type of style. Carlow had gone that way as well, like in terms of playing very, very defensive. I don't agree with it at all. I think the mark for the midfield, all right, when players were coming down, they were being swarmed and grand. But Jesus, having a mark above on one side of the field and having it down the other side of the field, stop, start. And I think the mark was originally brought in because they thought that they'd have long balls into the full forward line and all this kind of stuff. But there's watery marks like that are going across the field, and you're saying it, and it's a sneaky old hand up straight away. He knows he's doing it before he actually, and he's being cute. Look, he's being cute, but I don't think teams have zoned in on it, on the possibilities of getting the right fella. You empty a place and you empty a full forward line, you start roaring inside, and you get Dean Rock hanging around the 30-yard line, and he's going to have points for fun. And then you're trying to, we spoke there for the last 5 minutes about defensive play and how you need to man up. So you're going to spend time on how to deal with Conor O'Callaghan and how to deal with, and then an all watery mark. I just don't think it's part of our game. Outside of what you want to achieve, and they have a tough job, the rules committee, they don't have to be bringing rules all the time. Outside of what you want to achieve by actually bringing the mark, it's not part of our game. It's not part of our game. It never was. To give a free for catching a bloody ball, it actually makes me angry. I don't like talking about it, to be honest with you. And and my understanding of it is that if clubs wanted to change that 2025 is the thing, but that the rules committee that are governing it and they come up with the rules, that they could actually change it themselves. They brought it to Congress this year coming. And look, I don't question what they're trying to do with the game. I think they're trying to make it better for everybody. But I think, lads, anybody who's looking at the game now can obviously say that the game is going, it's in a good place because teams are trying to attack and treat. I think teams are looking at it differently in the terms of the way they attack. And that's why we're kind of half enjoying it a little bit more than we were 10 years ago.
Thanks, Tomás.
Lads, I'm just conscious of time there, Tomás. You're probably under pressure.
Yeah, if you want to go one more question, I have a class inside, lads. That not that I do much inside there, but I have to go in there all the same.
We'll get one more question if anyone has anything just to wrap us up.
Tomás, it's Niall McIntyre here. How are you?
Niall, how are things?
Good. There was an article there recently with Mike McGurn, the strength and conditioning coach from Fermanagh, and he was saying that he thinks a lot of inter-county teams are maybe over ticking boxes and maybe not focusing on the proper skills of the game that would benefit them like most. What do you think of that? Like, do you think there is overtraining?
Yeah, I don't know. Is it overtraining or is it the length of time they spend training? But I'd say he's in it a long time, and he spoke about the frustration that he wouldn't get involved anymore because you see what I think basically what's happening is we're training like professional teams and professional rugby teams, and I would say that comparable, very, very, very comparable. The problem is, lads, that they're going off into college and they're not getting enough rest or they're not getting enough downtime, and there's a lot of fellas working and there's a lot of fellas travelling, and it's not a professional environment when they leave the training. And I think the last year and the last whatever with COVID has shown that, hang on a second, do you have to spend the amount of time doing it? But you see, the fear is who won the All-Ireland this year and what did they do? Oh, geez, we have to do that kind of a thing. And there's this kind of copycat stuff. And it happened when the Ulster team started winning what they were doing. We bulked up. And then what are the other teams? Look, if you have teams that use, and a lot of teams that have that little success, you can guarantee that Dubs, like, I don't know, is the balance completely wrong in terms of what the off time is. It enjoys, and it doesn't have to be about the social side of it. It doesn't have to be downtime. but I question like our teams enjoying it really at the end of the day. And they obviously will say yes, but that's because they don't know any other way, because they're a part of a group now that have like, geez, I don't know what I stayed at it a good while, and I don't know what I stay at it. I was getting cranky towards the end, and the sessions were coming up to 2 hours, and I'd say that was 2013. You can imagine what it'd be like now, because I had been part of a thing 5 years before that. All that stuff wasn't there. I was getting very cranky towards the end of my year, and time, and that was part of it. Like, and I think 2 hour sessions, like, was there a need for it? Like, I don't think so. But look, everybody will push out the boat. They'll all be trying to look for an edge. Maybe not the very, very successful teams, but the teams that are trying to make the step up, and they'll push the boat out, and they'll spend more money, and they'll get more gurus, and they'll get more time to spend on extra thing, and they'll convince players that this is the way we have to go. We have to turn over every stone. And I'm not sure that that's the way it has to be.